Or under the hashtag C3T on Twitter. All right, welcome. We want to show how in Austria we're addressing the subject of state surveillance. We want to do this by two lines of argumentation. First of all, the abstract, apparent threat that is being portrayed bigger than it actually is to give reason to further surveil, and then downplay, on the other hand, the consequences that surveillance has on the regular folks. So we will look at this language that's being used very precisely and to understand how surveillance is being justified. Thank you, Angelika Adensamer. That is our law person amongst us, our advisor. My name is Thomas Lohninger, and we're going to speak on behalf of Epicenter Works. We are a company that is maybe mostly known for data saving, and that we took to the European High Courts. So if you don't know us that, you might know us from net neutrality with safetyinternet.eu. We pushed for net neutrality in Europe, but thank you very much. There was a round of applause. But continue to Werner Reiter, my other colleague up here with me. All right, I've never spoken in front of this many people. I'm a little bit nervous. Please help me out. There's a round of applause for him as encouragement. That was not the question. The question was, please raise your hands who does not like state surveillance or a state-run Trojan horse. Everybody's raising their hands, basically. Well, there's a few people. Now I have something for you. We have a video, but we don't have a sound. We'd like to show the video now with sound. We're now listening to a video. Everyone in the parliament who is pushing back against the kind of security package that we're trying to pass are basically attacking the Austrian public to not have security that other countries already have. All right, that is Wolfgang Zobota, former Minister of Inner Security, and he basically showed his response to you not wanting to be snooped upon, and you're basically being made out to be the attacker onto safety of a state.
The emotional blackmail that is part of this statement is the real bad thing. So you are bad citizens, he says. Sorry.
Gut, worum geht's hierbei? Wer uns kennt, wird
what is this topic, and those people who know me
die im Jahr 2017 in Österreich
will know that we've discussed proposed laws for Austria in 2017 of the black-red government. We'll come to the current developments, but at the moment it's not all that sure.
Und heutigen Parlamentspräsidenten immerhin dem zweithöchsten Amt in der Zweiten Republik.
Today Sobotka has the second highest office in the state, and he has said it as clearly as no other. And here are the measures that he wanted that caused us to take action here. So he's asking for networked video surveillance. He wants tickets in public transport, and he wants cars tracked.
Nur mit der U-Bahn. Es gibt von dieser Bewegung einen Eintrag.
So he wants all movement of anyone tracked. The thing that was discussed most
Hier, nämlich der Bundestrojaner.
was the
Staatstrojaner, wie es in Deutschland heißt,
the Trojan software, the spy software that they wanted to employ.
Verschlüsselung, die dank Snowden heutzutage in unser aller Hosentaschen ist.
Since Snowden, we have end-to-end encryption, and they want to break into it, and this is why they want a Trojan.
Von staatlicher Spionagesoftware.
This kind of espionage software has been tried to make legal in 2016 when our Justice Minister wanted to try and make it possible, and we tried to stop it then. And it was taken back before it was even finalized. And in 2017 they tried again. But they always want this kind of surveillance.
Wir waren kurz nach der Präsentation des Koalitionsübereinkommens schon mit einer Kampagne am Start. Stoppt das Überwachungspaket.
So our campaign was to stop this whole package of surveillance measures.
Ein gesellschaftliches Bündnis gegründet, wo Amnesty International unter anderem.
In the civil society, we found many supporters for this.
Wir haben erstmals in Österreich, in ganz Österreich Kampagnen.
And this campaign covered all of Austria, not just the network, not just Vienna, but all towns. We made a hotline where you could call politicians and convince them that this was a bad idea. Oh, that it goes far beyond anything that is compatible with our basic rights.
Um 11 Uhr mitteilen, dass ein Überwachungspaket keine so tolle Idee ist.
And
als dann die Gesetze
we all also called Mr. Buch at 11 on Thursdays to tell him that this wasn't a bad idea.
wo man ganz einfach Stellungnahmen
And we also produced a tool with which you could participate in the
ein toller Erfolg zu den Zahlen.
public survey and submit your own opinions.
Genau. Also, wir erinnern uns, im Jänner wurde das Ganze vorgestellt, dann war lange Debatte, aber nichts
So
Konkretes.
it was proposed, there was a long debate about it,
Und dann hat man gewartet, bis
then there was a long wait
wurden dann konkrete Gesetze
until the summer break, and then just before the summer break, the original
Da waren zum Beispiel
proposals were made even worse.
die es Providern erlauben, ganz normal
So they wanted to introduce
des Internets anzubieten,
network censorship,
von Jugend- oder Pornoschutz
and they wanted to have those filters
in der Produktgestaltung.
under the guise of protecting the youth and filtering out pornography.
Lauschangriff aufs Auto.
They also wanted to extend mobile catchers and wanted to extend them to cars.
Die schon verhindert hatten, war die Fußfessel für
And we also had prevented the
einfach nie weiter verfolgt.
prevented the
Kritik am Überwachungspaket ist, dass es grundrechtswidrig
the foot tracker for dangerous people.
Privatsphäre.
So what we are asking for is protection of
Überwachung kann
private
schon den Menschenrechten entsprechen. Es ist
Private-
nicht
of the private
automatisch so, dass
domain.
es grundrechtswidrig ist. Es muss aber die konkrete
not every form of surveillance is automatically contradicting the Constitution.
Zum Beispiel durchaus auch Sicherheit sein, aber
And there must be multiple aspects for this to be
erforderlich und angemessen
compatible.
sein, um diesen Zweck zu
And
erreichen.
the main aspect is that it needs to be appropriate. And during the whole debate, there's never a justification on how it would improve security, and the compatibility and the appropriateness is never proven.
Ironischerweise auch für unsere Sicherheit.
So we see it as a danger to our freedom and ironically also to our security.
Vereinbarkeit mit den Grundrechten geprüft werden.
So we insist that all of those things together are checked for their compatibility with our basic rights.
So we're going to go back further a bit to the very beginning. So what was the starting point for all of this? The sound is not very good, but it's a historic video, and I've got to show you. And I have a very personal example. It's a few years old. Back then, every 3 weeks, I had like basically a dump of shit, human shit, in front of my house. So I put cameras up in front of my house, and after that, no more shit in front of my doorstep. I hope with subtitles it's fine. You probably also misunderstood what he was saying. Our Minister for Inner Security is obviously fighting shit dumps in front of his house with cameras, and he doesn't think about why anybody would put a dump in front of his house. And I mean, this is very symptomatic for this kind of debate on security in Austria, and probably also for other countries. You try to fight the symptoms with placebos to really speak about the reasons for stuff, which is why where we get to politics of emotions. And now we're going to watch the second part of the video. And the surveillance of the camera, and that it's only a security feeling, and that gives people the feeling of security. So this is a very central kind of term that's being used in the debate on security. It's about the subjective security feeling. It used to be a feeling for people who fought against this kind of surveillance, and today it's the feeling that's being used to give reason for implementing measurements like this. I mean, this is obviously not about stopping attacks to happen. This is not about measurements to prevent stuff from happening. These are all measurements that are being implemented and established in other countries and are not being effectively put to use. But in Austria, yeah, we still kind of actively try to use this rhetoric to justify measurements that were undertaken. We're going to hear another quote from our minister from his last few days in office. We know today that the next attack is being planned. We don't know when, and we don't know where. And this is also very typical. It's about protection from very abstract threats instead of concrete, evidence-driven attacks. And this is how laws are being passed against potential attackers. They're not concrete. It's about people who are not actually giving any reason to be planning an attack, but apparently in the abstract they're being dangerous. So in the new agreement, the new parliamentary agreement, it says that there needs to be a measurement that you can undertake before stuff even happens. So you want to start limiting electronic measurements of communication for people who are being potential threats. So, I mean, we could all be potential threats. You can only say that you're against this kind of security package, and based on our Minister of Inner Defense, you're basically an attacker onto the democracy of Austria. And the problem with these kind of databases of potential threats is that it's really hard to then afterwards be taken out of these databases. Like, how are you going to prove that you're not a threat any longer when you were there, being put there in the first place on very flimsy kind of evidence? So we've talked about this kind of abstract yet very big bad threat. And the measurements that we want to use against this are very small. We're going to watch another video. We just basically want to close the gap. We just want to close the gap in our measurements of surveillance by using digital means. I mean, it's all about like closing a little tiny gap in the surveillance that we've been using anyways, and then everything is being safe again. That's the thing with the technology. We a lot of times reach the threshold of understanding technology, and it's kind of like making family policies and not really understanding how families actually work. In this case, it's unfortunately not leading to people stopping to make more statements. They are kind of more fired on to do more. We can see more. I mean, we could basically, the have more like people in cybercrime that could like technically look at what this looks like. All right, thank you very much. I mean, I'm not the really technical expert, but I could. Yeah, sorry, I can't explain. So Peter Gredling, who is the boss of the protection of the Constitution, basically the boss, and we should remember this name because he's going to come up later. Very similar is the Vienna head of the police. So you could look into the software being used, and you could basically look into people's private homes, and his response to that is kind of like, well, I mean, these are technical measurements, and I mean, like, you can't say that these technical measurements aren't possible to execute. And they're basically showing a bit of like technical ignorance, like you basically can't have a fact-driven conversation with these people as they do not fully understand the technicality of things. So their attitude towards this is more that towards of a toy, where they're like, oh, why don't you just give them the toys? Let's just not talk about it for longer. Let's just, now we're going to look at the former Minister of Justice. So if the boss of the BVD thinks these are important measurements, you just have to undertake them. I mean, he's like cheering people on to give more applause. Basically, one reacts towards the wishes of the safety of the Constitution safety, and he cannot give a response on how this is supposed to technically work. But don't worry. It is for me very curious how the state permanently, where everybody swears an oath on the Constitution, that they're being basically accused of misusing the kind of data. I mean, basically just trust the government because they never misuse data. It doesn't exist, does it, now? I mean, there's multiple examples of data misuse. I mean, I can give you one example where one police officer gave a woman that he liked information and data on the current men that she was seeing and on his background. And I mean, like, no, there's no misuse on a state level when it comes to personal data. I mean, you shouldn't just trust the state and the government.
I personally wouldn't trust anybody who defends themselves with arguments like those.
Ja, hier gleich nochmal, das ist Werner Amon.
Here again, this is Werner Amon, the security speaker in the parliament. He says data protection must not be misunderstood and turned into perpetrators' protection. But data protection is a foundational right that protects everyone, including perpetrators. And there's nothing to be misunderstood about it. And secondly, those permissions are permissions to investigate, and they are directed against either both those that are accused and those that we don't yet know.
Die Überwachungsdebatte ist geprägt von einer sehr, sehr seltsamen Wette.
Now the debate on surveillance is characterized by a very diffuse or surprising competition logic. It cannot be that and here comes a football analogy.
Champions League, Regionalliga. Ja?
Champions League and regional league.
Wir haben von Innenminister Sobotka schon gehört, andere Länder hätten das auch und wir bräuchten das.
Other countries also have those surveillance capabilities and
anderen Ländern, sondern direkt in den Wettbewerb mit Terroristinnen und Terroristen. Das heißt, was uns Werner Amon hier sagt,
we're not going into competition with other countries, but we're going in competition with the terrorists.
anwenden, die auch Kriminelle anwenden.
So we need to apply methods that also the the criminals use, but perhaps that isn't what he meant to say.
Zeigt sich auch teilweise ein etwas eigenartiges
So there's a strange
Unser Ex-Innenminister Sobotka
interpretation of democracy.
Die Sicherheit stehe über der Politik.
So here he states that security is more important than politics. I don't want to not have a political discussion about this, and I do not understand why it needs a political agreement on this.
Das war
Or
bis jetzt mal
political
soweit die Debatte. Bis dann der
compromise.
Wahlkampf im Sommer 2017 passiert.
So that was a debate, and then in 2017
weiterhin
elections,
zwei sehr beherrschende Themen im
there were
innenpolitischen Diskurs.
2 topics in the internal politics,
Ist,
or
ehemalige
internal
Kanzler
security
Kern.
politics.
Die SPÖ hat es komplett vermieden, sich eigentlich in diesem Thema zu
So the FPÖ
Statements von eher
did not take any
Parlamentsclub.
stance in this
Der Kanzler
debate,
hat selbst gemeint, dass er so eine sensible Materie doch nicht in den Wahlkampf ziehen will.
and he said he didn't want to draw this sensible, this
aber auch eine Chance verpasst, sich auf die Seite
delicate
der
topic
Rechten
into the
auch mitten im Wahlkampf
election.
von Konservativen abzugrenzen.
and he does not want to use it to distinguish from the conservatives.
Das die ÖVP. Man macht ja im Wahlkampf gern ein bisschen so Wohlfühl, viel gut.
So here the ÖVP try to
in unserem Staat, aber keiner
make people feel good,
sie für das Überwachungspaket weiter trommeln. Mich erinnert das frappant.
and they stated that they made it seem like they were against it, but they continued with it.
Es gibt übrigens immer noch kein Transparenzgesetz im
There's still no transparency law.
Ja, vor
Under
der
the new,
Wahl war die
government.
FPÖ noch in der Opposition, nun ist sie in der Regierung. Damals
Before
hat
the
Frankreich
elections, they were opposition party,
das
and
wäre
they were
das Ende
against
des
it,
Rechtsstaats, wie wir ihn
and
kennen.
they
So
declared
eine
it to be the end of the
undenkbar. Man sieht hier auf dem Bild Kickel, der
legal
jetzt Innenminister ist von der FPÖ.
law-based
Und
state.
was wir auch hier versucht haben zu illustrieren, ist, wie immer wieder vermischt werden die Themen Islam,
So
Migration,
here
Terrorismus,
the topics
Sicherheit, Überwachung.
Islam, migration, security and surveillance are mixed up in order to create insecurity and create emotions.
Hier haben wir Harald Wilimski, auch ein hochrangiger
This is Harald Wilimski, a high politician from
EU-Parlamentsabgeordneter
ÖVP,
und stellvertretender Vorsitzender
and he is
von Europa der
he's
Nationen
an
und der
EU
Freiheit, also
delegate.
der rechten Fraktion, und ist hier auch noch als oppositioneller österreichischer.
And he is in
möchte zeigen, dass sie eine Sicherheitspartei ist aber keine Sicherheitspartei, sondern lediglich eine Überwachungspartei.
he says he's in the opposition party, and he speaks about the ÖVP, which was his opponent then and now is his coalition partner, and he says that they want to be a security party, but really they're only a surveillance party.
Nach dem Nationalen Sicherheitsrat trat Innenminister Sobotka vor die Kameras und erklärte, er gibt auf.
After the National Security Council, he stood before cameras because the left wing succeeded, and all of those items, after 8 months, we took them off the table. With 220 people, we submitted 18,000 comments, and that was the biggest in Austria, and with long distance.
Was uns vor allem sehr auch gefordert und gefreut hat, war, dass dieses Thema wirklich
difficult for us was that
es ist ja klar, dass
this topic needed to be discussed.
Dinge, wo öfter über solche
in
Themen
Austria.
debattiert wurde, aber es gab mehrere Chefredakteurinnen und Redakteure, die sich dazu geäußert haben.
Now we've had multiple journalists from
Und insgesamt haben wir eine Debatte erlebt, die
that wrote about it in their newspapers.
auch in Boulevardzeitungen gezeigt hat, dass die Leute
Even Boulevard papers were talking about it, and we are very proud that we managed we prevented 10 of those 12 topics.
Wir sind natürlich jetzt nach der Wahl.
And now it is after the elections, and the whole thing is coming up again.
Und Sie können sich noch an meinen Spruch erinnern vor mehreren Monaten, wo ich hier gesagt habe,
You can remember my statement from a few months ago, and when I said it's an attack on the security to not do this. If we don't give those abilities to police, then we have few chances to find the terrorist networks.
Wiederholt die Anschuldigung, die gegen euch erhoben hat.
He repeats the accusations that he made in the beginning of this talk towards you, towards anybody who thinks that these kind of measurements are
Bekräftigt, hält euch für potenzielle.
threatening democracy. So he thinks all of you are potential terrorists.
Wir haben seit kurzem ja auch
Since very shortly we have a new government, and when the coalition papers were released, we released an analysis of the 180 pages, and we color-coded their relevance towards cybersecurity and surveillance, and we basically color coordinated by traffic lights. So there is gaps in internet communication that are supposed to be closed. You basically can see the Trojan horse of surveillance lurking in the corners. And that's not all. If you remember Dieselgeras, there's supposed to be a database where all of your reports from kindergarten over high school to university are supposed to be saved to then be made accessible for potential new employers in the future. And for grown-ups, this is supposed to be introduced within all e-learning classes, and they're being basically looked at by... Oh, sorry, I lost my thought there. So there's another topic, another bigger topic that's kind of above all of this. This is the third attempt to introduce a third Trojan horse run by the state. And I mean, that raises the question, is like, when have we actually finally won? When do they remember? And the tough response to that is that civil rights are not defending themselves. In order to protect our civil rights, our fundamental human rights, we need to be aware, we need to keep up awareness, and there only needs to be one moment of unawareness where that can be taken away from you. The FPÖ that back in the days was so much against surveillance is now in line. This is our new Minister of Inner Defense, Herbert Kickl. Oh, it's basically... he's basically paraphrasing what the other guy was saying about how it's impossible that threats from outside have these capabilities, technically speaking, but the own government and the own police are basically not allowed to access the same kind of technologies to defend themselves. But they've also taken on another rhetoric, the one from the counterparty from the electoral campaigns. So in the first interview that he's given, he was basically quoted saying, if our security is doing well, all of us are doing well. Funny enough, the website itself that the news was released on is not even under HTTPS security yet. Oh, the irony.
Spiegelt sich leider auch wieder in viel gefährlicheren Dingen, wie zum Beispiel Bundestrojaner, Videoüberwachung und all diese Dinge.
And I mean, obviously, like, what they're thinking about is, once again, the same bullshit that we've heard over and over again. To come to a conclusion of this, we would like to talk about our language, the language that we used to have something to be put against the kind of political rhetoric that's been going on. So what we've tried to really make sure was make clear that this is a package of surveillance. And we successfully managed to set these as rhetoric of the media. This was not a security package. This is a package of surveillance. These are all surveillance measurements. So this changing of the narrative was what I want to conclude on, because that, I think, is the aspect of this story that is maybe potentially, for all of the people who are interested in this, or even in the private life, is maybe the most useful. The changing of the narrative that we need to make possible. We only win the debate on mass surveillance if we change the subject. There's a lot of other measurements that can be undertaken that are a lot better and more effective for security, while also still maintaining our own privacy. We need a fact-based politic that is still in line and in accordance with our fundamental human civil rights. We need to have all these measurements being checked towards their accordance with our constitutional rights, and that's what we can thank you on. Thank you for listening. Applause from the audience. I don't think we have time for questions, but we have an assembly in Hall 3, right beside EFF and ADRI. We're here until day 3, and even on day 4 for a little bit. And we are a donation-based association, so please support us. We need it. Thank you so much for listening to the talk, The Language of the Surveillors, by Thomas Lohninger, Werner Reiter, and Angelika Adensamer. The translations today for you did
Always 10,000.
and Merle. Send us feedback if you have any at C3Lingo or under the Twitter hashtag C3T.